Well, happy anniversary, Raconteurs community. All right. My story takes place about 8-ish years ago in Chile. At the time, I was in a very previous life. It feels like much longer ago, but I was co-owner and producer in an independent documentary production company in Montreal, which sounds so cool. It wasn't, which you'll hear more of soon. So I had this super cool job and a very close friend who was the director, and we started this company together and had big visions for films we were going to make. And one of them we did make, and it actually did very well, and it's still doing very well. It's called El Huaso. And the story of El Huaso is about the director and his father, and they're a Chilean-Canadian family with a tough male lineage. And basically the story of El Huaso in a little nugget. I'm not a producer anymore, so I don't have like a nice shiny pitch for you about why it's such a great film. But it was the story of, the director's name is Carlo, and it's the story of Carlo and his father, their relationship to each other, and also their relationship to illness and death. And so the story of Carlo's father, Gustavo, is that he was sort of quasi-diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And he had decided that before his illness advanced, he wanted to take his own life. And so it was the story of Carlo conversing with his father about this, the trauma of that, the mystery and the difficulty and all of those things. I was really passionate about the story for lots of reasons, not only because Carlo was a friend, but because I believe in dignity and illness, and all of these important things in my life were in the film for a little bit of time. And then one of the ways that Gustavo dealt with his illness and his difficulty was that he would go back to Chile once or twice a year, and he would compete in the rodeo as a huaso. It was like kind of one of his forms of therapy, is like self-medication. So we were gonna go to Chile and shoot the rodeo. Like, so glamorous and cool. It wasn't. It was really, really rough. I thought it was for a minute glamorous and cool, but at the time, already leading up to Chile, the relationship with Carlo and I was very difficult. The subject matter of the film is obviously very challenging, and it was insular and difficult, and I was, like mid-20s, trying to run a business in another country in a language I don't speak, with an all-male crew in rural Chile with all-male cowboys. It wasn't like a shining moment of womanhood for me, let me tell you. I've been very fortunate and traveled a lot, and I've never been met with such aggressive misogyny and difficulty as a woman. I was basically perceived as a kind of secretary or potential hooker for the cowboys. It was so shitty. It was so bad. It was such a bad time in such a beautiful place. And interestingly enough, in our time in Chile, where this working relationship is really fraying, it's abusive, it's angry, it's painful, it's sad, and we're dealing with this content of the film that is really, really heart-wrenching in a very challenging context. Oddly, on that trip is where we got some of the most important scenes for the film, I think. So I don't know, some lesson is like torture brings beauty. I don't know. Well, you can see the film. I don't know. You can tell me. But, there was some moments of beauty in those weeks, or maybe even, I was there for, 6 weeks or something. There was beauty in it. I just couldn't see it at the time. And so I was alone a lot of the time, because the crew, who was all men, would go out and shoot. And sometimes I'd go with them, or sometimes I'd stay back and, do woman things. And it was hard. It was the darkest time in my life, and I was isolated and lonely and getting a little freaky in the head, because I didn't really know what to do with myself in this context. And so we were in a town called Reñaca in Chile, and I had heard these rumblings that there was. I used to study religion. I'm very interested in Christian iconography, intellectually, and kind of spiritually, even though I'm Jewish. But I'd heard that there was this shrine to this saint, and I was kind of interested, but I didn't have my wits about me to go do cool shit when I was on my own. Instead, I just decided to stay in and stew in darkness. And so one day I was doing that, and I was actually getting really concerned because the dark thoughts I was having they weren't like run-of-the-mill depression thoughts. They were like some next level shit, and I've been blessed that I haven't had times like this in my life before or since, happily to say. But they were scary. There was like some self-harm thoughts going on, and I was like, oh fuck, this shit ain't right. Like, I remember in high school there was someone I knew who was like a girl who was a cutter, you know? And I was so upset by it and so concerned, so I called Kids Help Phone. If you grew up in Ontario, maybe you know what that is. It's like this line you can call when you're a kid and be like, my friend. And one time I called just to see what it was like to be like, my parents are getting divorced. And they were, but I was really okay with it. And they were really supportive, and I tried to like play victim. I'm like, I think it's because of me. They're like, it's not. I'm like, they're totally doing their good job. So Kids Help Phone I trusted, and I called them about my friend who was, I screamed them. I called them about my friend who was cutting herself, and they gave me really, really good advice. I was like 13 or something. But here I am in Chile. There's no fucking Kids Help Phone. There's no adult started a company too young with not a good business partner match help phone for you in rural Chile at all. There was no cell phone. I had very limited internet access. And so all of my like everyday superheroes, and I have lots, I'm so blessed, a life full of friends and family and therapists who were just like phone calls away. And I have such a strong community where I was, and I had none of it. And the people back home, my superheroes, they didn't know about the kind of dark place that I was in Chile, and they certainly didn't realize how dark it would be. They knew things were like a bit awry. So nobody really knew what was going on for me, which was a real challenge. I was super, super isolated. And then one day when the dark thoughts were happening, there was one day where they kind of just came to visit for the first time, and I was like, who the fuck are you? Like, I got a manicure a couple of weeks ago in this time frame, and she like cut my cuticles a bit too hard, and I was like, ow. And it was like really traumatic. Like, I'm not one for pain, you know, like I don't like it. So I was so alarmed by these thoughts, and I was like, I know, I'll go outside and I'll look at the ocean. I was in this beautiful place, and I go and I look at the ocean, and being in nature and the majesty of it always calms me down when I'm like, my problems are so big, because I think about like what's in the ocean. There's like phosphorescent jellyfish and shit, and when you think about that, or when I think about it, I become really humbled, and I'm like, oh, your problems are nothing, because there's jellyfish that glow like fireworks, therefore you're fine. That was not happening. I just stood there, I remember, for a very long time, looking at the ocean, like waiting for some kind of message, some kind of release, and there was nothing. I was like, oh shit, this is real. You're not doing good. And I was healthy of mind enough to know that something unhealthy was happening in my mind. So I wrote down in a notebook, I was like, note to self, shit's getting real bad. See therapist when returning home. But that I needed like a short-term solution. So I had heard about this shrine in Reñaca to San Expedito. And I was like, I'm going to check this guy out and see what it's all about. I didn't go to the shrine, but I did a bunch of research, and I saw iconography of him all around. So when I could get to a computer, I wouldn't email home and be like, SOS, I'm going mentally crazy. Instead, I would Google search San Expedito. He's the saint of impossible expeditions. I was like, that's my fucking guy. Like, I need that guy. Like, I can't call my mom because she'll get really scared because I'm going crazy, and the friends, I have to explain a lot. Like, I was just like, I need to talk to somebody who's actually not going to talk back to me, and who's just going to help me and protect me and get through these next few weeks. So I got pretty obsessed with him, started to do my research, found an amulet with his picture on it, and yeah, I totally still have it. He's so awesome and helpful. And you know, I really believe with religion, like, you take what's helpful for you and what's not, you just like discard, which is like the same with superheroes. I really love Batman, but I don't understand how he keeps changing in all the movies. Like, why isn't it still Michael Keaton? It doesn't make sense. So he's just like, I kind of stopped after that. So the same for me with San Expedito. So his story is that he, and the stories of saints and martyrdom is so interesting in Christianity, because it's basically like, maybe this happened, maybe this person existed, maybe he didn't. Here's this image of him, do with it what you need. That's my interpretation. And his story is that, you know, he was in the Roman army, and he ended up in Armenia and saw the light of God and was like, oh, I'm going to convert. I'm not into polytheism, so I'm going to convert. But he kept it quiet for a bit. The day he was ready to convert, this crow comes along with a message that says, tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. Like, convert tomorrow. You could just keep being a warrior today. And he's like, no, fuck you. And the crow is the devil. He steps on the crow, kills him immediately, and then gets beheaded, naturally, and dies, and becomes this martyr. And ends up in Chile through, I don't know what channels of centuries of good God knows what. But he ends up there mainly because this one woman heard about him and was like, we need a shrine to him here. And the priests in the town were like, no, we're not doing that. You're being a ridiculous woman. So she prayed to him for a week straight until they're like, okay, we're going to give you the message has been received, we're having the shrine. So some badass woman was just like, some Jewess from North York is going to come here one day and fucking need to get it on spiritually with San Expedito. She's actually the real superhero in this story, I'm realizing. But this guy, I'm telling you, even though it is not miraculous externally, it was miraculous internally, because he was this, like, imaginary friend that could talk me off the ledge of harm, like, have me realize that if I didn't change my shit as soon as I got home, and I'd push things off till tomorrow, like Devil Crow, that I'd be straight fucked. Yeah. So he was my biggest superhero. He helped me stomp out that devil in my life at the time. And you know, I came home from Chile, still shaken. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and he stayed with me through all that. And I had my real life superheroes back, so I wasn't like too far off in mythology land. I was able to like come back. I wore him around my neck really, really religiously. I was just like, I'm not letting you go. I was like afraid of the subway for a while because of the problems, and since then, not afraid of the subway. No super dark crows. I mean, I attributed a lot to him, but mostly to me and to the superheroes I have in real life. I would have preferred like a non-warrior, non-violent, non-religious female superhero to enter my life at that time. Like, I don't know, like Gem and the Holograms, or I don't know, like Catherine McCormick or something awesome like that, or Nina Simone, but they weren't in Chile. And I think of it like you have to find the superheroes with the alchemy of the land that you're on. You know how they say, like, you should eat the honey of the place that you're in, because something, isn't that like a thing? Like a herbal thing or something. Anyways, I found the superhero that I needed at that time. So that's all. Thanks.